Last time we talked about Moses. Moses, one of the greatest leaders that Israel, I think, has ever had throughout the history of the Old Testament. When you look at who he was, what he did, and how he approached his work. So, obviously, quite some big shoes to fill once Moses left and died, and the man that was to replace him was Joshua. So big shoes to fill. So what do you do in this time? I think we've all had situations in which we've had a great leader beside us, next to us, leading us, and maybe they moved, maybe they died, maybe they were the patriarch of your family and they passed away. Maybe this was a boss. Maybe this was somebody that was just a great friend that kept the group together. Everybody was always in touch because that person was the glue, and now they're no longer present. How did that group evolve from that time? How does that team go forward in their mission when that main leader is removed? How do churches move forward when, a great elder or a great preacher is no longer there? And I think it has to do with the leaders that are still there in place, right? There's a reason that we should have more than one elder. It's a team of men that are leading us. And it's not just about the different personalities, be able to manage all the other different personalities, but God sets us up in a way that we can effectively manage his church. He can effectively lead his church by these different groups of men, not just because one is essential, but because the group is essential. And when those leaders are essential to that group, there's always one or two guys that may be more charismatic, greater leaders, and that's fine. That's good. Those are those qualities that God has given to them. They should use those to the best of their ability. But what about those men that are left? And so here we see Joshua. He is another leader, one of my favorite guys in the Old Testament, but he replaces Moses. So what are the characteristics of Joshua that allowed him to be an effective leader? And how does one replace such a great, profound leader as Moses with such big shoes to fill? There was a young couple who had been married less than a year, and they were going to have Thanksgiving dinner at their house, and all their family was going to come see them. And so the wife asked the husband to go buy a ham. It was their tradition. They always had a nice ham on Thanksgiving. And so he gets the ham, he brings it back. She asked him to get the big pan out, and so he gets this big pan out. He thought he got the biggest ham he could find, and that ham was still about half the size of the pan. Well, the wife takes the ham out, unwraps it, and she cuts the end off. And he says, "Well, why'd you cut that end off the ham?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. We've just always done it this way." He was like, "Well, but why? Why did you cut the end off the ham?" He said, "Well, my mom has always cut the end off the ham. I don't know. Let's call her and find out." So they get mom on the phone. They said, "Hey, mom, making the ham. Why do we cut the end off the ham?" And she says, "Well, we've just always done it that way." She says, "Well, I know that's why I did it, but why do you do it? Why do you cut the end off the ham?" She says, "Well, that's the way your grandma always did it. Let's get her on the phone, call her." So they get grandma on the phone. And they say, "Grandma, why do you cut the end off the ham?" She goes, "Honey, because my pan is too small to fit the ham." So why do we do things the way we do them? One of the things that kind of gets under my skin sometimes is, well, it's because it's what we've always done. We've always done it that way. And sometimes we don't really have an answer why. And so that question of why is not necessarily a bad question. It's not a challenging question. Sometimes it's informative. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to take that end off the ham because you're wasting good meat. It still fits in the pan. Fits in the pan just fine. So ask that question. One of the things about Joshua, and we see in the Old Testament throughout Exodus, is Joshua was prepared. He wasn't just another guy within Israel. He was prepared. He was a military commander. Some say probably the late 30s, maybe. In Exodus 17, verse 8, Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So shortly after the Exodus, Moses chose Joshua to lead the defense against the Amalekites. And this was Joshua's first recorded leadership role, proving his ability to organize an army and his reliance on God's power. So Moses took Joshua and said, I need you to do this. You're going to lead these people, and we're going to fight against the Amalekites. Again, Moses had an aide and minister who was Joshua. He was his personal assistant. In the Hebrew, it's the word sharat. He accompanied Moses up on Mount Sinai, which placed him closer to anyone in the presence of God other than Moses. And this equipped him with an intimate understanding of the law and the weight of the spiritual authority. So he was next to Moses in a lot of these encounters that Moses had. And he got a firsthand account of some of the things that Moses had to do, some of the decisions that he had to make. Again, scholars say that he was probably around 40 at that time. And when Moses turned up again in the camp, he assisted Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man who would not depart from the tent. So Joshua wouldn't leave. He wanted to stay with Moses. He wanted to glean from his understanding of what Moses did and how he led effectively. He was a man that sought after this role. He was a faithful spy. Joshua was one of the 12 of the spies that went to scout Canaan. 10 spies brought back the report of fear, but Joshua and Caleb stood alone in their conviction that God would grant them victory. Demonstrates the different spirit that required to lead a rebellious nation. Joshua, how difficult is that, right? You see the land of Canaan, you know what God has promised, you've been in proximity to Moses, and you understand what God is going to give you, but 10 of the 12 people that's with you are saying, no, we can't do this. And 2 of you stand up and say, but yeah, we can. Joshua wasn't afraid to take that step of courage and say, no, we can do this, and here's why. It's not because of our power, it's because of God's strength. That was 2 years after Exodus, so he's probably around 42. That's from Numbers 13. The transition and public commission, the legitimacy of Joshua. Again, he wasn't just another person in the crowd. And toward the end of the 40 years in the wilderness, God formally instructed Moses to ordain Joshua. This public ceremony, laying on of hands, transferred authority and ensured the people would follow Joshua just as they had followed Moses. So Joshua is given this authority from Moses. And in Numbers 27, and Moses called Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land. So the Bible refers to Joshua as a young man, and scholars have him around 40 during these accounts that we just listed there. The last one, when he takes over, he's around 80. So if he was 40 during the time of early on, that 40 years of wandering, and he's going to take them into the land of Canaan, puts him around 80. That's 40 years, again, of training. That's 40 years of preparing oneself to lead. And we see by the context and the content of the scripture that he wasn't just laying by, he wasn't just waiting, he wasn't just watching. He was actively pursuing the things that God wanted him to do, which is the reason that God would have chose him to lead the people after Moses. It wasn't by happenstance. It wasn't drawing a name out of a hat. It was intentional. Number 2, go ahead and go to Joshua chapter 1. Joshua was a take charge kind of guy. God gave him the authority, and he encouraged him. In verse 5, he says a few things. He says, no man will stand against you. He says, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Now, if you're Joshua and the Lord is telling you, no one is going to stand against you. Not only that, I'm not going to leave you, and I'm not going to forsake you. Those are pretty strong words from Jehovah. Telling this man Joshua, look, I need you to fulfill this mission. I need you to continue leading the people, and I will be with you. So he has to have some excitement. He has to have some encouragement by this. He has to be humble with taking these things. He can't just be puffed up. He can't say, well, I can do all this because God's with me. Now watch what I can do, right? We kind of saw how that worked out for Moses when he struck the rock and kind of took some of the credit away from God. But he is humble. Verse 6, he says to be strong and of good courage. Again, in verse 7, it says, only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do accordingly to all that it is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. So God says, I'm going to be with you. Now here's how you do that. Here's how you stay with me. You stay in the word. You stay in my commandments. You don't turn from the right or to the left of it. You stay with it. Stay with me, and I stay with you. And be strong and of good courage. Again, in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do you think that's important? How many times does he say that? I counted 3. Be strong and of good courage. He wants Joshua to not only be humble in his approach, humble in who he is, be authoritative, be strong, and be courageous. As you enter into these trials, it tells him to observe and do all the law. The law will not depart from your mouth. And then again in verse 9 it says, do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. He takes charge in verse 10. It says here, then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, and then he gives them the instruction of what they're going to do next. Now, when I read this, I don't read this as there's any time that really lapses by between this conversation between him and Joshua and the instructions that he's received from God. I see him as, metaphorically coming out of the tent after having the conversation with God and then going straight to him. He gets straight to work and he tells them what to do. He doesn't wait for this transition period to soften. He doesn't wait for any pomp and circumstance. He doesn't necessarily wait to alter the plan or maybe come up with a different approach. He knew the plan. There was nothing wrong with the plan. He had the mission, he had the authority, and so he went and sought it out. He reminds the people of Moses' command that God is giving them in the place of rest. He didn't wait for an adjustment period, but also he didn't change the plan. He was well prepared for what should happen and how, and carried the torch of Moses seamlessly and continued on with the plan of taking over Canaan. Another reason leaders should be prepared in advance of taking over in their place of leadership. Leadership is not just something that you fall into. There are times in which that might occur, but throughout your life, continual preparation and understanding that at some point you may be called on to lead in some form or fashion is essential to understanding how to be prepared. When it comes to church leadership, I believe 100% wholeheartedly that every young man should want to and strive to become an elder. The church needs good, strong men, good, faithful, godly men to be elders. And it is an honor to do that. The Bible says it's worthy of double honor. And when you have young men that don't know anything about leadership, how are they going to take those reins someday? And so as fathers, every young man should aspire to be a father as well. Us as fathers, it's our job to teach them how to be a man, how to lead their family, how to treat their wife, how to treat their children, how to treat their friends. It is our job to train them in that way. It is also our job to train them in the way that God wants them to grow. And in what direction? How are we growing our children closer to God? How are we raising young men to be faithful, godly servants who can someday become elders? Because there's a lot of qualifications in this book for elders that we can stumble and miss on if we aren't preparing ourselves from an early age. And it's essential. It is necessary. 3, Sometimes when you teach, you step on people's toes, right? And I think if whoever's taught a class, you understand when you start speaking about certain things, you're aware that you might step on a few toes. This one, I'm going to step on my own. Because Joshua, it says, was an early riser. How many early risers do we have? All right. How many aspiring early risers do we have? There you go, my guy in the back. I aspire to get up early. Do I? No. I'll set my alarm for 5:15 and 7:30 rolls around and I'll get up. And I don't know what it is. There was a time when a couple years where I got up at 5 o'clock every day, sometimes 4:30. And it was great. I was the most productive I've ever been in my life when I did that. Probably the most tired too. But chapter 3, verse 1, chapter 6, 12, and 15 talks about as Joshua prepares the people to attack Jericho, he rises early to make the journey. And again, he rose early the first day, and then again the seventh day of that attack on Jericho. And there's a reason that getting up early, I think, matters. A lot of people will say that, the 1% of the leaders in the world, they are early risers. They get up at 5 o'clock and they start grinding. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. There's only so many hours in the day. And for me, the reason I want to be an early riser and I aspire to get up early is so that I can do more with the day that has been given to me. There's, 8 or 9 hours a work day, sometimes 10 or 12, depending on how the day goes, sometimes 5 or 6. But then you also have time to eat. And then you have time that you need to spend with your family. And then you have time that you need to be in the Word. And you have time that we come here and we worship and we study the Bible together. And then we have time to go to basketball games with every kid that you have. And that takes up a lot of time. So time is fleeting. There's only 24 hours in one day. You got to sleep, you got to eat, you have to work, you put your hand to the plow. You got to do the things that you need to do to support and provide for your family. And you also have to be there for your family. If I sleep till 10, that doesn't mean I can stay up till 2 a.m. Rising early is important to get done the tasks that we need to get done. The Bible talks about Abraham rising early to overlook the destruction after Sodom and Gomorrah. It talks about David rising early as his men pursue the Philistines. Jesus rose early to pray, and in Mark it says that he rose early while it was still dark. That is something that whenever you are the first one up, how calm is it? Think about when you had small children or when you were in a house with multiple people, whether it was college or whatever it might be. If you were the first one up, especially if there was some time before anyone else got up, you had time to think. Get you a cup of coffee, sit down, read some scripture, look at the paper, whatever it is that you do. But you have time to yourself to kind of think. And when you do that, it's almost euphoric. Like you have this sense of peace. And then somebody wakes up. And they come down and sit next to you and start talking your ear off. It's a good thing, right? It's good. But it ruins that time that you had by yourself, by the time that you had with God. Or it doesn't ruin it, it just takes place of it. And then the day starts. And that wheel starts turning. You don't get that back. So rising early, I think, is essential to getting the most out of the day. Ephesians 5:15 through 16 says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but as wise, making the best use of time because the days are evil." And there was a time whenever I was waking up early, I'd go to the gym and work out and get to the office about 7 o'clock, and that's when I would read my Bible. And I'd be the first one there. No one showed up for 30 minutes. And then slowly I started noticing that some guys would start showing up 15, 20 minutes early. And they asked me what I was doing. I said I was reading scripture. And it turned from me being by myself reading the book to us reading it together. And that was valuable. Though I don't know how it turned out for them. We didn't get that deep into that study. But for about a year, we read the Bible together, and we had some good biblical conversations out of them wanting to do that because they saw me doing it in my office. It wasn't my intention. It's not why I did it, but that's how it turned out. And it's amazing how things like that will happen when you put that time in and you're intentional about your day, you're intentional about your time and how you use it, those opportunities that end up presenting themselves. Be careful how you walk. Understand your surroundings, what company you keep, and what environment you're in. Be intentional with who you are and what you are doing, making the best use of your time. When I talk about raising young men to be leaders and to be elders, this is part of that, making best use of your time. I think as a young man, I wasted more time than anyone on the planet. I played more video games, I played more sports, I ran around and did some of the dumbest things that you would ever hear someone do. And it was a lot of fun because I didn't know any better. But when you're in your 20s and even late teens and you're coming up and you're starting to learn about the world, we waste a lot of time. It's because we're not intentional in teaching our children on how our time should be well spent. How do we embrace this life fully with godly awareness of ourself and our surroundings? Refuse to drift through your days on autopilot. So why does that matter? As the Ephesians 5 says, because the days are evil and time is devoured by distractions. The devil wants nothing more than to distract us from our mission. That is probably his easiest goal that he has. And the easiest thing that he can accomplish is to distract us from our goals of being more godly, being more Christ-like, raising our children to do the same. It has to do with all the things that he puts in place, all the things that we put in our face. Not bad things. I love football. I love the Texas Tech Red Raiders. However bad they stunk it up in the Orange Bowl, I love them to death. And none of you will convince me otherwise that they aren't the greatest team in the land, so don't even try. But it's a distraction. If I allow that sport and that school to overwhelm my thoughts and my mind, it will distract me from the more important things that I have to accomplish. Whether that be missing time for services, for family, for whatever that might be, to go to a football game or a basketball game, whether that might be going to school there and pulling myself away from godly people and not realizing how much I needed the church and replacing it with school because I didn't have an identity at that time. I allowed my identity to become the environment that I was in. That environment that I was in was not a great one. And when you do that, that distraction, that's the evil that's talked about in Ephesians 5. That evil overcomes your life and you become someone that you didn't even realize you were becoming because you weren't intentional with your time. If we cannot get all the work done we need to accomplish, it could be that we are not using the days to their fullest. The Bible's clear about slothfulness and being lazy, so be self-aware that producing good fruit requires attention to how you manage your time. Again, I've stepped all over my toes with this one, and this is a lesson that I'm glad that I'm speaking about right now because we'll put some different action into place after this. Number 4, Joshua had a good reputation. Joshua 6:27. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. The natural consequences of a good leader is a good reputation. What are two of the things that the Bible says about elders in the context of reputation? 1, to be above reproach, and 2, well thought of by outsiders. Good leaders will have good reputations. Think about in Judges. We studied for a whole quarter on Judges. What happened to the people when their leaders were bad? The people fell away. The people became bad. What happened to the people when the leaders were good? The people were good. And they stayed looking to God. They stayed in his commands. Bad leaders have bad reputations. Good leaders will have good reputations. It matters what people think of you. It matters what people think of you. Some will hate you for it. Some will hate you for being a good leader. And I've heard it said that being hated by the right people is not a bad thing. Meaning, if evil people hate you because you're good, then you're doing something right. Being loved by the wrong people is not a good thing. If evil people love you because you're like them, then we need to understand what the difference is. Good leaders will have a good reputation. Be aware of him who regards not his reputation. Ecclesiastes 7:1 says, a good name is better than precious ointment. Leaders have to make tough decisions, and they're not always popular ones. Knowing the difference between doing what is right because it is right and doing what is easy because it won't ruffle any feathers is essential for wise leadership. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing, no matter who's looking, is the right thing to do. Making the easy decision because it won't ruffle feathers or it won't upset this person or that is not always the right thing to do. Again, this isn't an if-then conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas and circumstances that can be lobbed out there in which a decision should be made in order not to ruffle feathers, and I'm not arguing that. But what I'm saying is that continually making good decisions because they're the right thing to do, regardless of what the potential outcome might be, is the right path to pursue. When you follow the process and you go through these struggles, even though they might not feel right when you're going through them, and you follow that process and in a godly manner, we're not talking about ungodly decisions. We're not talking about people that aren't following the will of God and his commandments and his doctrine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about those that do. And when you're following that path, there can be loneliness. It can feel uncomfortable. But when you're making the right decisions because it's the godly decision to make, he will bless you for that. People will end up seeing that, yes, it was correct. But how do we know if those are the decisions that we should be making? How do we know if those are godly decisions to make? Well, he told Joshua, stay in my word. Stay in my commandments. Don't turn from the right or to the left. Stay with me, and I will not depart from you. I will not leave you. That's the key, is that we stay with him. Once we start deviating from his plan and his purpose and his will, we start taking on our own ideas and our own ideologies, and we start accepting this fact that, well, our culture might be a little bit different than that and all this. No, we stay with God because he is the one that gave us the plan. And when we follow his plan, we follow his word, we follow his will, he will bless us for that, and we cannot go wrong. Follow the same pattern as Joshua, keeping God's commandments, remaining faithful, strong, and courageous, not fearful or dismayed. This keeps leaders focused on God's desire for his people, and he will bless us for that. Understand, though, that sometimes the decision itself isn't the issue, but rather how it's communicated, right? I've been in companies before where it wasn't necessarily what was asked of me to do, it was how I was asked to do it. And that sounds like such a millennial thing to say. I didn't like the way you said that. Can you rephrase it? Can you be nicer? But sometimes it's not how we say it, sometimes it's not what we say, it's how we say it, that the information gets lost in the fringe. There was a Gallup poll in 2015 shows that 79% of people contribute effective communication to their overall level of engagement, meaning that almost 80% of people in the workforce will say they are more willing to engage in new work, different work, difficult work, if it's communicated. It's not necessarily even communicated effectively, it's just communicated. When that communication is there and it's present and the people understand what is needed from them and desired from them, 80% are more willing to engage. Versus 30. That's a big gap. They're 3 times more likely to engage if manager holds regular meetings, So more frequent communication, 54% increase in engagement if the manager is deemed as approachable. So if you have a rough and gruff manager, there's 40%, 46% less likely engagement because he's not deemed as approachable, or she. 67% said they were more engaged when the focus was on the employee's strengths, which makes sense, right? If you're asking people to do things that they're good at, they're obviously going to want to do them. That's pretty easy. If you ask me to lead singing, I will tell you no. I'm not good at it. I'm not going to embarrass myself or anyone else in this building by leading singing. It's not a talent I've got. But if you ask me to teach a class, you ask me to say a prayer, you ask me to build something, you ask me to run into the parking lot, I can do all these things. Let's go. I can lift heavy stuff. You need some help? Let's do it. More likely, 67% more likely to engage in things that they're good at and are their strength. So following this pattern, keeping God's commandments, and remaining faithful are the key to this good reputation. Number 5, before we get to the application, Joshua was focused on his family. One of the most famous verses in Joshua, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. 24:13. Let's actually go there. Joshua fully understood his responsibilities, not only to lead the people of Israel, but as a father and a husband. No matter what all the other people do, he makes a stand. His family will follow him as he follows the Lord. Balanced leadership comes from complete commitment to God. I'll say that again. Balanced leadership comes from complete commitment to God. When you think about balance, you think about putting everything on a scale so that it all has equal weight distribution. Balance between my home and church and work and hobbies. I don't think this means they all get an equal share. We don't put all the things on the scale so that it will all balance out because they're not all equal. But when we put 100% of our effort and our energy into the things that God wants us to do, that balance means that God gets 100% of me. I give 100% of myself to him, and the rest falls into the place where it needs to be. You've seen the analogy with the jar and the large cylinders, the medium cylinders, the small cylinders, and the sand. If you put the sand in first, how many of the larger balls do you get in there? None. So you start with the larger, medium, smaller, and then you put the sand in, and amazingly, it all fits. God is the largest piece of this puzzle that we have. If we try to put him in to the different areas of our life, it'll never balance. But when we put 100% of what we have into what he wants us to do and how he wants us to do it, it is amazing the way that things will work out in both at home, at work, and in the rest of your life. Because you've committed yourself to him. And he's already told you that when you do that for me, I will do that for you. When you commit yourself to me, I will bless you. Same thing he told to Joshua rings true for us today. Joshua 23:14-16. I'm going to read that real quick. Behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing has failed of all the good things which the Lord his God has spoke concerning you. All have come to pass for you, not one word of them has failed. He's telling them everything that God has said he was going to do for you, he has done. Not a single one has failed. Therefore it shall come to pass that as the good things that have come upon you, which the Lord your God promised you, so the Lord will bring upon you all harmful things until he has destroyed you from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. When you have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and you have gone and served other gods and bowed down to them, and then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and you shall perish quickly from the good land which he has given you. And then he says, you do what you want, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He gives them the warning. You've followed these other gods. You've fallen into this idol worship. And this is the thing that's going to happen to you if you continue in that path. And as I read that, I wonder for myself, what other idols, what other gods am I unknowingly following? What other things have I put in place of my relationship with God that are distracting me from the responsibilities that I have to my family, to this church, to his kingdom? What am I putting in the way? He's not putting it there. If there's something in the way between me and my relationship with God, it is self-inflicted. And I need to be self-aware of what those things are. The distractions are endless, and we have to be self-aware and avoid them. Make the best use of our time, serving God regardlessly of what anyone around us is doing, including our own brothers or sisters. Simply glorify him in all you say and all you do, and choose to serve him. This word choose isn't just a fleeting decision. It's not just something that we can say, we'll get to it. Yeah, I'm all in. When you choose to serve God, you are taking whatever was in place of the reason you couldn't and removing it and saying, this is what I will do, and I will devote and dedicate my life continually to serving him. It is a choice. And it's only up to you to do it that way. No one can make you do it. I've seen it happen. Doesn't work out real well. But it has to be your choice. And when you dedicate yourself in that way, it means way more to you. When you dedicate yourself to God and the path that he wants for you and your family, the blessings that come from that are endless. And the joy and the completeness and the peace that you will have are astounding. Leaders must be focused on their family. I said it before, I want nothing more than to train young men to be elders, to be deacons. Because when we pursue that path, even if we might fall short, even if we don't necessarily desire that position at that time, you will have created in yourself a person devoted to God and to his church. And that is a good thing. But focusing on the family, becoming an early riser, having a good reputation, taking charge in the roles and responsibilities that we've been given, and being prepared when that time comes and we're asked to lead in a certain way are all characteristics that Joshua embodied and showed, really a great pattern on how we can achieve this just like he did. I heard the bell ring, and I'm almost done with my mint, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Application, every leader will be replaced, so be ready. Understand that not every leader is going to be around forever, and there need to be capable people to replace them. Those younger, be coachable, allow yourself to be tested. Put yourself in the path of opportunity. Volunteer, request to put in work, and be present. 2, your reputation must be guarded. Being above reproach is not just a facade of capabilities, but depth of character. Don't be lazy. There's great works that need to be done, and the more proactive we are in pursuing the mission of Christ, the better equipped we are to handle future leadership opportunities. Don't neglect your family. Do what you want, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's not just a statement, but it's an investment in your family. Take charge. God's people are not necessarily supposed to be passive. We are to take charge. We are to be strong and to have good courage. When you've been prepared, you've been trained, you've been tested, you are qualified to lead. It's essential that you follow that pattern where you are trained, you are tested, and you are prepared. So when that opportunity comes, you can take charge. But know whose plan you're going with and not your own. Follow God's plan, follow his will, follow his word, follow his instruction, and you will always go in the right path. All right. believe that's it. The mint's gone. Y'all have a good week. God bless you.